আমার সমস্ত শিক্ষার্থী বন্ধুরা এবং যে সমস্ত ছাত্রছাত্রী শিক্ষার্থী যারা নেতাজি সুভাষ ওপেন ইউনিভার্সিটি থেকে ইংলিশ অনার্স করছেন তাদের জন্য আমার এই ভিডিও। আমরা এখানে অনার্স পেপারের ইংলিশ অনার্স পেপারের সমস্ত বিষয়গুলি পড়ে শোনাবো। আপনারা যদি সেগুলো অবসর সময়ে কানে হেডফোন দিয়ে বা যে কোনোভাবেও শুনতে থাকেন তাহলে আপনাদের অবসর সময়ে পড়াটা কিন্তু মুখস্থ হয়ে যাবে। আমরা জানি নেতাজি সুভাষ ওপেন ইউনিভার্সিটিতে যারা কোর্স করেন তারা সাধারণত বিভিন্ন কর্মকাণ্ডে যুক্ত থাকেন, কেউ সরকারি চাকরিতে যুক্ত থাকেন, কেউ বিভিন্ন ব্যবসা বাণিজ্যে যুক্ত থাকেন, তারা সময়টা একটু কম পান। সেই জন্য আমরা ইংলিশ অনার্সের যে পেপারগুলো আছে EEG-1 to 8 এই পেপারগুলি প্রত্যেকটা আমরা সিলেবাস অনুযায়ী ভাগ করে আপনাদেরকে শোনাবো। আজকে শোনাবো অনার্সের ফার্স্ট পেপার EEG-1, তার সিলেবাস এবং অধ্যায়ের কিছু অংশ, প্রথম অধ্যায়ের কিছু অংশ। EEG-1 এই টেক্সটটি, এই বইটি প্রধানত আলোচনা করা হয়েছে ফ্রম দ্য বিগিনিংস টু চসার লিটারেচার অ্যান্ড ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ ইন ইভলিউশন, এই ব্যাপারটা আলোচনা করা হয়েছে। এখানে আমাদের EEG-1 এটাকে 4টে মডিউলে ভাগ করা হয়েছে। মডিউল 1 এখানে আছে হিস্ট্রি অফ ইংলিশ লিটারেচার, ওল্ড অ্যান্ড মিডল ইংলিশ। এটাকে 3টে ইউনিটে ভাগ করা হয়েছে। ইউনিট 1 অ্যাংলো সেক্সনস অ্যান্ড কন্টিনেন্টাল ইনভেডার্স ইন ব্রিটেন। ইউনিট 2 ওল্ড ইংলিশ লিটারেচার, পোয়েট্রি অ্যান্ড প্রোজ, beginnings. Unit 3 England from 1066 AD to 1400 AD. মডেল 2তে যেখানে আলোচনা করা হয়েছে সিলেক্ট টেক্সচুয়াল রিপ্রেজেন্টেশনস অফ দ্য পিরিয়ডস, এটাকে 3টে ইউনিটে ভাগ করা হয়েছে। ইউনিট 1 আছে এক্সট্র্যাক্টস ফ্রম বিউলফ প্রলগ, দ্য ফাইট উইথ গ্রেন্ডেল বিউলফস ফুনারাল। ইউনিট 2তে আছে প্রলগ টু দি ক্যান্টারবেরি টেলস, পোর্ট্রেট অফ দি ওয়াইফ অফ বাথ। ইউনিট 3তে আছে দি সেকেন্ড শেফার্ডস প্লে। মডেল 3 এটা মেনলি আলোচনা করেছে ফিলোলজি। এখানে ইউনিট 1 আলোচনা করা হয়েছে স্ক্যান্ডিনেভিয়ান অ্যান্ড ফ্রেঞ্চ ইনফ্লুয়েন্সেস। ইউনিট 2তে দি লাটিন ইনফ্লুয়েন্স অন ইংলিশ ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ। ইউনিট 3 আলোচনা করা হয়েছে শেক্সপিয়ার্স ইউজ অফ ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ, ইনফ্লুয়েন্স অফ দ্য বাইবেল। মডিউল 4-এ মেনলি এটা ফোনেটিক্স, রিটোরিক অ্যান্ড প্রোসোডি নিয়ে আলোচনা করা হয়েছে। এখানে ইউনিট 1-এ আছে ফোনেটিক্স, ইউনিট 2-তে আছে রিটোরিক, ইউনিট 3-তে আছে প্রোসোডি। যাই হোক, আমরা এই EEG-1-এর সিলেবাসগুলো নিয়ে আলোচনা করলাম। এখন আমরা EEG-1-এর ইউনিট 1টা নিয়ে আপনাদের পড়ে শোনাবো। আপনারা যদি কানে হেডফোন দিয়ে এটাকে শোনেন তাহলে অবসর সময়ে কিন্তু আপনাদের পুরো বিষয়টা মুখস্থ হয়ে যাবে এবং আপনারা সহজেই সেটাকে নিজে থেকে লিখতে পারবেন। মডিউল 1 হিস্ট্রি অফ ইংলিশ লিটারেচার, ওল্ড অ্যান্ড মিডল ইংলিশ। এখানে ইউনিট 1-এ অ্যাংলো সেক্সনস অ্যান্ড দি কন্টিনেন্টাল ইনভেডার্স ইন ব্রিটেন, এটা নিয়ে আলোচনা করা হয়েছে। প্রথমে আমরা যাই ইন্ট্রোডাকশনে। In this unit, we are going to study Anglo-Saxon or Old English literature. The Old English language was very different from English as we know it now. In this unit, we are going to learn about the early inhabitants of Britain, their history, culture, language, and literature. We shall see how the Romans, during their occupation, civilized the ancient Britons, and how, after their withdrawal, Germanic tribes, first from the continent across the English Channel and then from the Scandinavian countries in the north, invaded Britain, gradually settled there, and how from the mixture of many Germanic tribes the English people come to be. Early Britain and the Roman occupation. Prehistoric Britain was peopled by a group of rustics who had migrated from western Russia and the shores of the eastern Baltic. They introduced farming, had the prudence of storing surplus grains, and could heal forts. They were the Celts who, after their arrival in Britain, found out the use of iron. One division of these primitives called themselves Britons and gave the name Britain to the Iceland. It was the Celts who fought the great Roman general Julius Caesar on the sea beach when he invaded Britain with his legions in 55 and 54 BC. But the disturbances in Gaul kept the Romans busy, with the result that the Celts in Britain were left alone for another 100 years. But Caesar's invasion exposed the Iceland to the other races. Pressed by the Roman army, the Gauls, the Celts, kinsmen came over in small batches. The pattern of society of both the Celts and the Gauls was tribal, and their chieftains were constantly fighting among themselves. They failed to put up a united resistance when in 43 AD the Roman Emperor Claudius took earnest steps for a systematic domination of the Iceland. The Romans had encountered stiffest resistance among the Wales Mountains and the northern moors. The savages of northern England and of Caledonia, that was Upper Scotland, held out against the highly drilled Roman army for more than a century, until Emperor Severus gave up the thought to conquer Scotland. The Romans stayed in England for 400 years and exerted an intense influence on the life of its inhabitants, particularly in the south and the east. Tribal feuds were systematically controlled, population increased, trade and commerce flourished, towns sprang up, Christianity got a foothold, and a sense of unity gradually developed. Roman engineers laid from roads, farm roads, remnants of which still exist. The Britons learned how to build villas with windows. The British blood, that was already a fusion of the prehistoric primitives and Celts, got a dose of Roman blood into it from the soldiers, the merchants, and their countries of the empire. Many city dwellers also began to take up Latin way of lifestyle in their daily affairs. এরপরে আসছে invasion by the Germanic tribes. In the early years of the 15th century, the Romans were compelled to leave England in a bid to defend Rome against the barbarians of the East. With their departure, fresh invasions from across the sea took place. The Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes, and the Franks swarmed to the Iceland from the continent in succeeding waves for about 700 years. The invaders belonged to the same ancestral stock as the Celts, had allied languages and customs. Their property too sang of the same racial heroes. The first specimens of the poetry of these people show clearly that their culture was similar to the Celts of Britain than to the Romans or the Greeks. The Jutes were the first to arrive and came from Jutland. The Angles came probably from the northwest Germany and the south Denmark, and the Saxons from west Germany. As the Angles and the Saxons were the most numerous, the entire body of migrants is called Anglo-Saxons. Writers writing in Latin in the 19th century first used the term Anglo-Saxons to refer to these people in order to distinguish them from their kinsmen on the continent. The Anglo-Saxons were fierce sea rovers who were not afraid to face challenges from a harsh nature. They were fierce fighters, and large sections of native inhabitants were killed by them. Their conquest was so thorough that the civilians and the language of the ancient Britons disappeared completely. The remaining natives were driven to the jungles and mountains of western England. The Anglo-Saxons did not adopt more than half a dozen words of the ancient Britons. There was a fresh mixture of blood as the invaders captured British women and married them. This time the racial stock changed. The Anglo-Saxons called their new home Angleland, which in course of time changed to England and finally England. Introduction of Christianity. During the last 200 years of the Roman rule, the Christian church was established in England and the Celts were converted to Christianity. The Anglo-Saxons were pagans and their invasion drove it to the mountains of Wales. From Wales, a Roman Briton, St. Patrick, took it to Ireland and became the patron saint. It was from the Ireland that the gospel travelled back to Scotland. For various reasons, the church did not succeed in spreading Christianity in Britain. In 597, a chosen band of missionaries under Saint Augustine, sent by Pope Gregory, landed in Kent, which is the part of Britain nearest to continental Europe. The Anglo-Saxons, who had first set up small kingdoms, subdued the whole island within the span of century, except the mountainous Wales, the remote Cornwall, and Strathclyde. These kingdoms gradually merged into larger political units: Essex, Sussex, Wessex, Kent, East Anglia, Mercia, and Northumbria. The then King of Kent had married a Christian princess of France. Under the Queen's influence, the King Ethelbert became one of the Augustine's first converts. With the conversion of Christianity, England came in closer touch with Mediterranean culture and mainstream Western civilization. It marked a turning point in English literature, language, and history. The Roman Church, an international organization, consolidated its hold in England for the first time. It increased the Anglo-Saxon natural enthusiasm for music, taught him not only Latin but also law and charity. The monasteries became centers of learning. With books brought from overseas, they opened libraries. English universities owe their origin to the intellectual pursuits of Christian monks. The Anglo-Saxons wrote in Ranis III. The monks taught them the Latin alphabet and made writing easier. The monks wrote and transcribed all the oral songs and folktales of the Anglo-Saxons and preserved them. The Scandinavian invasion. Anglo-Saxon invasion of England was not the last of its kind. In the middle of the 19th century, the fresh hordes of pagans from Scandinavia invaded England and all but destroyed her new faith and learning. They came from Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. They are known by the common name of the Scandinavians. At first, they came to plunder and left as soon as their boats were filled with gold and valuables accumulated in the shrines and monasteries near the sea. Then, having denuded the coast, they penetrated inland. The Anglo-Saxons were no match for these ferocious invaders. By 871 AD, the Scandinavians had destroyed Northumbria and Mercia and besieged Wessex. The history of domination shows the soldiers of one generation turned landowners in the next. The Scandinavians, too, were no exceptions to this rule. They learned agriculture from the Anglo-Saxons and improved upon what they had learned by virtue of their superior discipline and organization. They never lost their vigor and fierce spirit of independence and would have uprooted the Anglo-Saxons completely but for the statesmanship of the Anglo-Saxons King Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great was the king of Wessex when the Danes laid siege to it in 871. He belonged to the oldest Saxon dynasty. The fall of Northumbria, Kent, and Mercia brought the Anglo-Saxons together. At the Battle of Ashdown in 871 January, Alfred halted the invaders and gave his land peace for 5 years. In the Battle of Ethandune, Alfred inflicted heavy losses on the enemy and forced them to terms. Under the Treaty of Wedmore, 878 AD, the leader of the Danish, Guthrum, had to remain satisfied with Dani law, or Northumbria, East Anglia, Southeast Midlands, and parts of Mercia, about two-thirds of England. He and his followers also accepted Christianity. The treaty gave England peace for the following 14 years. To prevent fresh incursion by the batches of Danes, Alfred fortified the coast and built a navy. But shortly after Alfred's grandson, England had to accept a Danish king, King Canute. Gradually, the Anglo-Saxons and the Scandinavians merged into one people. The Scandinavians, unlike the Romans, were not culturally superior, so their contribution to English life consists of mainly a large number of everyday words. You will learn more about this in the module on the philology. The Norman Conquest. The last major invasion of Britain came from Scandinavians who, during their raids, had settled in northern France. They adopted French language and culture, intermarried with the French, and came to be known as Normans. The Dukes of Normandy had developed an efficient feudal system. They were good at war tactics as well as patrons of literature and culture. On the death of Edward the Confessor, Alfred's last descendant, William the Duke of Normandy, claimed the English crown on the basis of promise of King Edward. The King of England, Harold de Dany, had an even weaker claim. William crossed over to England. In the Battle of Hastings, October 1066, England's fate was decided in the hands of the Norman Duke, whom history came to famously recognize as William the Conqueror. He took a small span of only 2 years to conquer the rest of England. The conquest brought no new race to England because the Normans were also of the Scandinavian descent, but they came with a superior culture and literature and language of their own. They seized the land of Saxons, built castles with Saxons labor, and introduced a system of land tenure on military service. They did not disturb the system of the Saxon local government. For many years, the conquerors lived apart, treating their native population and their culture with contempt. So the fusion between the Normans and the Anglo-Saxons took a long time. Finally, by the 15th century, the people of Britain emerged clearly as a racial and cultural unit. You can understand from this early history of England how the English people combine several races and have a composite culture tradition in which Roman and Germanic, pagan and Christian elements are inextricably mixed. When you study the language and literature of England, you will notice how these various elements interplay in the English life and literary imagination. If you want to practice the questions for 20 marks, the questions are: write a note on how the Celts, the Gauls, and the Romans led to the formation of the Anglo-Saxon regime in ancient Britain. Question number 2. Describe how the Roman Church was established in Britain and how did it contribute to the introduction of Christianity in the ancient England. Question number 3. Narrate historically the events leading up to the Battle of Hastings in 1066. 10 marks questions. 1. What information do you get about the nature of the Scandinavian invaders? Question number 2. How did King Alfred try to unite the Danes? Question number 3. What was the immediate effect of the introduction of Christianity in England? Short answer type questions. Marks 5. How did the name England come into being? Who were the ancient Britons? Evaluate the role of the first established church in the introduction of the Christianity. Students, I hope আপনারা সবাই আমার এই বলাটা শুনেছেন। আপনারা যদি প্রত্যেকে অবসর সময়ে কানে হেডফোন দিয়ে এই পড়াটা শোনেন, তাহলে কোন রকম সময় নষ্ট না করে বা শারীরিক কসরত না করে আলো নিভিয়ে দিয়ে এক মনে যদি শোনেন, আশা করি খুব সহজেই আপনাদের এই চ্যাপ্টারটা মুখস্থ হয়ে যাবে এবং প্রশ্নগুলো আপনারা নিয়ে নিজে সমাধান করতে পারবেন। ধন্যবাদ। আমার সমস্ত শিক্ষার্থী